Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Shilpa Alva. I am the founder and executive director of Surge for Water. And thank you for taking this time this afternoon to join us for Chicago Water Week and this special panel organized by Surge, the organization that I am the founder and executive director of. And today's topic is about how Chicago is the city of big shoulders and how we are addressing the global water crisis. We have two great speakers who are going to join us in a few minutes. But before I invite them to join us, I would like to set the context about the global water crisis and Chicago's role in solving it. So to get started, the global water crisis that many of you might be familiar with these statistics, but impact over 2 billion people around the world. That's like billions of people who don't have access to safe water in their homes. And it doesn't stop there. There are also over 4 billion people who lack access to basic sanitation. And in an environment right now where washing hands with soap is one of the most effective ways to stop the spread of the pandemic, billions of people lack access to this basic need. So Surge for Water has a mission. We're a Chicago-based organization, and our mission is to solve for this issue, to work hand in hand with our global partners, with sponsors, with donors, with community members. And working together, we work on investing in solutions for safe water, sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual health, with the goal of ending the cycle of poverty. As I continue, welcome. I've just seen some new names who've joined in, some new participants. So please, use the chat if you have questions at any point. We'll try to take questions in between, but also we've allotted some time to take some questions at the end. So I was just introducing Surge's mission, and while we're Chicago-based and this is our home, we have a global presence. We are currently active in 4 different countries. You see 3 up here because we're running a pilot, which I'll tell you about in a moment, but our work is done in Uganda, Philippines, and Haiti. Everything that we do is community-led, locally sourced, where local governments, businesses, individuals are coming together to deliver the solutions that are right for the water issues that they are facing. This makes everything that we do truly sustainable. Earlier this year, we launched a pilot in Indonesia, in 2 parts of Indonesia, in northern Bali, in a community called Saraya, and in part of Indonesia called East Nusa Tenggara, an island called Sumba. And these pilots are doing incredibly well. So very soon, hopefully the next time you interact with Surge, you'll see 4 of these images up representing the 4 countries that we're active in. Since 2008, Surge has impacted over 1 million people. Our work is done in communities, schools, health centers. And along the way, I mentioned sustainability earlier. Along the way, as we are drilling or fixing wells, protecting rainwater harvesting systems, constructing toilets, delivering our education programs, we are creating jobs. They're full-time jobs, but they're also temporary jobs to deliver that solution. And all of this work that we're talking about is because there's really no argument or no debate about the fact that water is so transformational in every aspect of life. When we provide a community with access to safe water, there's a direct correlation in improvements in education, income, health, and just the overall dignity and well-being of a community. The World Bank has published many studies about the global water crisis and how investing in this infrastructure to solve for it can turn around economies, and they've shown that a $1 investment can return anywhere from like $4 to $32 or $34 even in return on investment from what comes back from the community once we invest in safe water solutions. So that's a very quick overview of who Surge is and what our mission is. As we continue this conversation, you'll hear more from our partners, and obviously I'm happy to answer questions. But today's talk is specifically about Chicago and water. And to set the context, our organization is headquartered here in Chicago. So we're on the banks of this beautiful Lake Michigan that is, as most of you know, is part of the largest freshwater body in the world. And when you want to think about how large this body of water is, it makes up 84% of the surface fresh water in North America and 20% of the surface fresh water in the world. That's how big this Great Lakes is, this large body of water that we're so blessed to call, part of our home for those of you joining in from Chicago. Understand there are probably people from other parts of the country and the world, but if you're based in Chicago, we have this lake that we see very often, and that also provides our drinking water and our water for many other uses. Chicago is also home to two of the largest water treatment plants or water filtration plants. The Jardine facility and the Eugene Sawyer facility collectively process 1 billion gallons of water per day. And we're also home to the largest water treatment or wastewater treatment facilities. I know that when we looked at the registrations, there were several people, individuals from MWRD who are on this call. So, you're well aware that you're treating, I think it's billions of gallons of water, have the capacity to treat that much water per day. So, as we talk about this abundance of water, I also want to take this moment to recognize that yes, while we have this abundance here in Chicago, there are also communities right here in the city and in Illinois who don't have access to abundance of water for multiple reasons. I know there are other talks during this week, even through the current programming, that shows that there are still insecurities that we're dealing with locally. And there are, as I shared very early on, there is a deep insecurity, water insecurity that's happening around the world with the 2 billion people that lack access. So as we talk about, what can Chicago do when we're talking about solving for the local, all global insecurities that are out there? We look to what are we good at? What does Chicago have to offer as a city to the world? And, it's a vibrant city. Anyone who calls us home can, recognizes the beauty, the river, the lakes, the architecture, just many of this, I guess, surface level things that you see. But of course, there's a lot more related to the water industry. We're home in Chicago. We're home to several, I think it's over 36 Fortune 500 companies, another 30 on the S&P index. So world headquarters to several companies, but also it's over 80 companies in the water and the wastewater treatment space call Chicago their headquarters. We have an amazing pool of talent, both through just the water engineers, so the industry and the academic environment. So water engineers, technicians, innovators. We have, places like 1871, which are these technology hubs, one of the greatest in the country and possibly the world. From a supply chain perspective, we are highly connected with 2 major airports, an amazing rail system. So just we're a hub of not just the Midwest, but also the world, the transportation hub. We have a thriving immigrant population. We have visionary leaders. And really, we have all of these different pieces that come together to position us to be this city and these people who can give back and try to solve for this global water crisis with innovation, with philanthropy, with corporate citizenship, and many other ways. And speaking of that philanthropic angle, we did some research, and Chicagoans in this particular study by the Chicago Community Trust sort of assumed that they gave higher than the national average. And it is true. They do give, as a Chicagoan, if you are a Chicagoan on this call, you do give at a higher rate than the national average. We have this deep motivation to help people in need. And we have this calling from this survey from the people that they study to give their time as well as their money. And we, Surge runs with multiple boards. We have a governing board, an advisory board, and a young professionals board. And through that network of like volunteers, we are seeing that Chicagoans like to give time and their money in solving issues. The one thing that was also interesting in this particular study by the Chicago Community Trust was that Chicagoans are more motivated to give closer to home. And part of our conversation today is about what does home actually mean, right? Like we are so interconnected and we share these global waterways. And, when you understand water and you understand things like climate change, we understand the interconnectedness of us being this global society, of being the shared humanity. And when you start considering our planet as home, then we start having this responsibility and this understanding that it is in each of us, in our calling and in our responsibility to help solve for this global issue. So the issue that we're trying to solve is the 2 billion people, over 2 billion people who don't have access to safe water in their homes at this very moment. While there are so many advances in technology happening, and while we have all of these amazing, innovations and education systems and all these things that are progressing at rapid rates, there are still fundamental problems in the world like safe water that continue to be an issue. So to join me today in speaking about this issue and what companies and individuals right here in Chicago can do to help solve for this issue, I invite Maya Zain from ERM Foundation and Jordan Robinson to please join me for this conversation. Welcome, Maya and Jordan. So I just went through and did a very quick overview of Surge's work and sort of like Chicago, the city of big shoulders, and how we should have this, or how we have this talent and this responsibility to help solve for this issue. And both of you invited here today for different reasons, but the main core connecting to Surge is that you're representing companies that have partnered with Surge for many years now to help solve the global water crisis. So with that, Maya, could you please introduce yourself, tell us a bit about you, ERM, and your connection to Surge.
Great. Thank you, Shilpa. I just have to say thanks for inviting me. It's been a great pleasure working with you guys for almost 4 years now. This topic is near and dear to my heart. My background is in civil environmental engineering. I did my dissertation around water. I did my dissertation around emergent contaminants in the Great Lakes, where I lived in Michigan. And then I moved to Chicago. So I've been surrounded by the Great Lakes and the abundance of freshwater resource. And I've been part of ERM for the past 7 years. At ERM, sustainability is our business. We contribute to sustainability through our consulting services, but very importantly through our ERM Foundation. And since 2007, Search for Water and the Foundation, we started this multi-year partnership. We've impacted 28,000 people in Uganda and Haiti through well fixes, through classrooms, toilets, hygiene and menstrual health training, and also building a health center. That work has been just extremely impactful and very much aligned with our sustainable development goals. As you guys are aware, the United Nations adopted these sustainable development goals in 2015 to target poverty and fight inequality and also tackle climate change. And so ERM has been involved with the SDGs, with the foundation, has been committed to making this measurable contribution and improving access to water and sanitation, including the hygiene and sanitation education, is one of our top priorities. And Surge basically fits that bucket very well. I have to add, I'm a recent resident of California, and I'm feeling the water crisis here more than ever.
Thank you, Maya. And also, I know it feels like we've known each other forever, but it was 2017. I think you said 2007. So I just wanted to clarify
Oh,
that.
2017, yes.
But that's a good sign. It feels like we've worked with each other forever. So it sounds about right that it could be 2007.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've had that much impact, like 28,000 people only since 2017. So what does that even look like for the future of our partnership?
Absolutely.
And Jordan, please, could you go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor to be here. I think depending on where you want to start it, we've been partners for 5 or 6 years now. And you came all the way up to our office in Northbrook and really gave this passionate presentation about the water problems. And specifically in Africa, it really resonated with me where I'd had some experience earlier in my life. And over the years, we've done multiple programs in all the different areas that Maya mentioned. And I think we've impacted somewhere on the order of 20,000 lives at this point. And you mentioned earlier, just the return on investment is just incredible. Water is such a fundamental building block for every aspect of society. And you know, being in Chicago, like you said, we're right next to the Great Lakes. It's so easy to take it for granted. But I mean, even just recently, there was, you know, that weird steel mill spill into Lake Michigan, and it just reminds you how fragile it really all is, and to be able to make an impact for so many people in a really thoughtful way. It's just a wonderful opportunity that we've had with you, and we're very happy with our relationship.
Thank you. Jordan, I'll ask you a follow-up question right there. It's, you know, we have been partnering together since 2014, 2015, and being a completely like a Chicago-based company headquartered in Northbrook, there are several issues right here at home, right, that need to be solved. And I know that SVB Research Group works on several of them, but why was a company like yours called to partner with Surge and make safe water one of your highest priorities?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and although perhaps it hasn't been the most direct Chicago charity that we do, but I think more importantly, our approach is to get our employees focused and spending time with charities. And the more people that they see doing that, the easier it is for other people to find charities of their own to support. So, for example, since we've partnered, we've now become partnered up with, I don't know, maybe a dozen local charities in Chicago. With this as an example, I think it has that effect, which is sort of like a general sort of benefit, but also I think, you know, it being such a center of you know, the financial world, it attracts a lot of people that maybe wouldn't all be in the same place otherwise. And so it's a good opportunity to gather that intelligence and really find good partners that can reach the world. Chicago is a metropolitan city, brings people of all different backgrounds together. And so it's a good unifier in that way. And I think it's been a good pathway for us to have a positive impact on the world.
I love when you talk about Chicago being a unifier for so many different people. I mean, what greater unifier is there than water, right?
Yeah.
I mean, something that, I mean, again, no argument, no debate there, like access to safe water to drink for life, for every aspect of living is one of the greatest unifiers. So Maya, speaking of, again, access to safe water and being, you know, one of, you know, the mission, sort of just core work, what was the calling for ERM in that space?
Shilpa, like I said, our business is sustainability, and as a global company with a long-standing commitment to contribute to the communities in which we live and work, and that's a lot of communities because we are very global, we have this unique position and also a responsibility to build on our technical expertise for sustainable world. And given that water is life, and as a crucial resource, we strongly believe that any contribution to mitigate any water issues would be greatly impactful. And just to add, being an employee-funded foundation, we're always looking for partners and issues where our grants really make a significant impact. And with the partnership with Surge and the work that we've been doing to improve access to water and sanitation, we've certainly seen that incredible impact.
Thank you. I just to share something that I was listening. So yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day, and I was listening to a podcast by an Indigenous podcaster, I guess. And the first chapter was called "Water is Life." And it was really beautiful because a lot of times, even when I speak, I talk about the fact that, water is a basic human right. And she says in this podcast that when we call water a basic human right, we're actually not even valuing the full part of water, because it's more than a right. Of course, it's a right, like that's a given. But water is life is even more powerful, because then it shows our interdependence and our interconnectedness on this source that basically, again, grand unifier connects us all. So on that note, obviously when companies make their decisions of who to partner with, so in this situation, Search for Water, employees are a big part of that. So Maya, you talked about employee engagement, and being an employee foundation. How have ERM employees resonated with this mission that your group has taken on in the company and this work?
Now, I talk about it a lot, so it's gotten to the point where it's really amazing. But every time we have a new recruit, or even during the interview process, they ask about the foundation. How can we be involved in the foundation? Tell us more about the foundation. So it's been really exciting. And again, I make it a little too exciting, because this is, to me, one of the most exciting parts of my job and the most fulfilling. So I really spread the news about the foundation a lot. But every year in our office, we have events. And so the events really cater towards foundation and what projects that we're working with. And I used to be in the Chicago office, and that used to be the main thing, is Search for Water and what we do. And so a lot of people are really interested in. And ERM now really brands that foundation in a big deal. So that's why our recruits, and even during the interview process, they always ask us about how can we be involved in the foundation.
We love that.
Yes.
Thank you. And then Jordan, I guess I'm going to ask you the same question, but almost from a different angle. Like something that we run into a lot here. So being a Chicago-based nonprofit and talking about the global water crisis, we find that a lot of people actually don't resonate with us, because they're, again, on the banks of Lake Michigan, and maybe they're not living, because there definitely are parts of the city that have water insecurity, but maybe they're from a community that doesn't. So walking up to the tap, they don't have to have any concern about lead in the water. It's flowing, you're watering lawns, you just moved to California, so you're experiencing drought that way. So we find it's actually sometimes quite hard for us to get our message across and to have people relate to it in a way that it's like, yes, we are connected. This is shared humanity. What happens here does impact other parts. So how have you, SPV research groups, employees sort of connected to this? Like, has this partnership helped employees understand this connection? Have you had a hard time explaining this? Because again, it's not seen,
Yeah, I'd almost flip it on its head a bit, because the contrast is so stark. So when I provide updates from our projects, to the company, and people ask questions, as they always do, and they're fascinated with, one, that these problems exist, and then two, the scale at which they exist. And then I think also, the compounding effects of these problems are so vast that you find ways for people to connect with that. So I know, for example, I think it was last year that we did the latrine construction, and in sort of explaining that to my coworkers and to Sam and Matt, who are sort of the decision makers here, explaining how that actually bridges all the way up to education, and what are the effects of that. And so, thinking through, well, what if you lived in a neighborhood where, maybe you have access to water, but maybe you don't have access to good schools. is that something you care about? And of course it is. And I think it's been a really great way to engage people. And especially, I'm fortunate to work with a lot of people that are very, intellectually minded, and they care about the world, and they love to discover that there are problems that especially are solvable, like we've found, or at least on a scale that we found in a pretty, effective way. So, I think it's difficult to say that has brought any kind of concern to the local sort of water issues that exist in the city, but certainly on a global perspective, it's been eye-opening for many of the companies and very engaging in that regard.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to ask another question related, but, as you talk about this, SVB research groups investment in surge over the years, when I looked at Chicago Water Week schedule, there's a lot of panels and discussions about innovation in the space. So like solving the global water crisis through, technology and data and just several amazing things that are happening in this city. And SE Research Group is it's a hedge. I mean, it's a fund, right? And you're doing like sort of high-end things. So the work that we do is actually quite basic. It's very fundamental. We aren't using high-tech technology. We're drilling and fixing wells. We are protecting springs. We're building toilets. We're doing these things that are, could be considered quite elementary, but very fundamental. So has that ever been something that's come up? Like, where's that support of like funding, like innovation in the sense that, technology sort of innovation versus like, these are just fundamental basic things that are needed in these communities. Just wondering.
Yeah, it's interesting you put it that way. So a big part of what we do is not just, technology or investment, but it's also portfolio management and maintenance. So I know this year we've talked a lot about, the hiring of a monitoring and evaluation officer that has sort of these broader network effects. Yeah. And so that's something that jives very much with how we approach the world, and trying to find tools that have synergistic effects and can scale. So, I'm like very hopeful that at some point, we've got a dedicated software engineering team that are brilliant, and they're very good with data analysis. And as we sort of grow our relationship together and collect data and figure out best ways to do that, and then use that data to figure out where, the biggest impact can be had. I mean, that's absolutely a long-term goal that we have with you.
Yeah, amazing. And I'll take this moment too to share that with both these partnerships with SVB Research Group and with ERM, the trust that your companies have had in Surge and our model has honestly strengthened us and have been helped us grow. So when we talk about something as big as the global water crisis, and you talk about, again, I keep saying these numbers because it's just that large, I think, that needs to keep being mentioned, the 2 billion people that don't have access. Like, how do you solve for something like this? And then we believe at Surge that we all play a role, right? Our community partners play a role, our beneficiaries play a role, because we always say that our beneficiaries are not just beneficiaries of aid, they're owners of their transformation. They are actively involved in the solutions. And then your companies and each of you play a role because you both have been ambassadors in your companies to basically share Surge's vision and mission so that you can bring along other employees. So in that whole spirit of being ambassadors, because really, I mean, at this point, I mean, Maya, you thought we worked together since 2007, right? Like we go way back. So it's in that spirit, right? Of like strong partnerships. What has this partnership with Surge taught you about the global water crisis? Like personally, like let's keep the SVB Research Group and ERM aside. So like Maya, what have you learned from this partnership, and how has that changed your life and like your role as like a steward in this space?
I'll tell you a little background about me. While most of us think of water, we don't think of water from a day-to-day basis. I personally grew up in a country where you had to worry if you have hot water today, mostly for electricity reasons, but I can never say I got to experience what these communities that you help out endure from day-to-day basis. So the partnership with Surge has really brought into perspective to myself and the team the day-to-day challenges that we mostly take for granted living in the US, and especially living in Chicago, surrounded by that abundance freshwater resource that surrounds us. And at a personal level with my own family, I know my daughter hears it all the time, turn off the tap water. Some people don't have water. And she looks at me like, what are you talking about? Some people don't have water, that there's water that comes from the tap. And it's not because we now live in California and water is clearly a very hot topic here, but because of the experiences and the challenges that I've heard from the communities and the work that you're doing in those areas, it has really changed that perspective for me. It also doesn't help that I'm an environmental engineer. This is an important issue for me. I also taught at DePaul, and I've become more conscious, not just with everyday water use, but the food that you eat, because that consumes a lot of water. So, being food conscious, the things that you buy and all of that. So the stories that you hear from your communities just makes it more real. They're not just problems that you read in textbooks or in news articles. Those are real problems.
And Jordan, what about you? We've had these conversations in the past, but would you like to share how this relationship has shaped you yourself? And
yeah, I think everything that Maya said also applies for me. For one, it brings mindfulness, about how many problems there are for so many people around the world that it'd be really easy to either ignore or just be totally unaware of. And I also, lately, with the effects of climate change, and we're seeing droughts and things of that nature, and the impact on agriculture. These are not just problems for people in the mountains of Uganda. I mean, these are real problems for everyone, and we should view them that way. And the solutions that we apply, in third world countries, are really important to bringing up those communities and trying to make the world a safer place for everyone, really. And so I don't know. I came at this from, like I mentioned earlier, I used to live in Africa for a little while, so I have some firsthand experience, just with how much work and time and effort goes into securing water that you need to cook every day. And for me, just to see the effects of the work that's been done, so many people are benefiting in ways that I couldn't imagine. And then these sort of like secondary and tertiary effects are always so fascinating to me, and the educational impacts are incredible. So I just don't view this in its own silo of water. I think it's everything. It's what is life and what's possible and what's fair. And it's a nice way to remind myself that it can be really easy to be here, but it may not always be the case, and that's something that we should perceive elsewhere always.
And Jordan, please, where were you in Ghana? Can you remind me where?
That's right. Yeah, I spent a couple of years in Ghana. That's right.
So and it's also something else that you just said was you talked about climate change, and when we talk about Surge's mission, we're working on the access piece, water, sanitation, hygiene, access. But of course, we're directly hand in hand with what's happening in terms of climate change. So when we look at our communities, in Uganda, we're working in Kabramaito and Kalaki, remote districts in the northeastern part of Uganda. And just in the last 12 months, in between this global pandemic, which they're also, dealing with in a big way, the communities we worked in went through a major drought, and right after major drought went through major flooding. And farming seasons are completely toppled. So here you're talking about a community that's already marginalized in many ways, and they're dealing with the effects of climate change in such a strong way. And when we talk about water and providing access, we also have to deal with too much water at some point. So then when we are building water sources or toilets, we make sure that they're flood proof. That's actually part of our systems, because climate change is real. And then we go to Haiti, and an earthquake just happened there, but then you have hurricanes that go through, and then you have mudslides, and again, dealing with effects of climate change and what that can do to certain communities, especially in like remote mountains of Haiti, for example. And also, I'll just say one more thing here about this climate change conversation. We're also realizing as an organization, a growing organization, that when we've been working in certain communities that have access to groundwater, that have access to safe surface water, and they just need a way for us to harness that water, whether that's drilling the well or protecting the spring or purifying it. But as, again, climate change is having its effect to different communities, we are also noticing that there are situations where there isn't ground or surface water to harness. So we are now doing a lot more rainwater harvesting systems. So our pilot project in Indonesia that I had mentioned earlier is just building basically a giant lake for a community. It's a 111 cubic meter tank that we built just for 60 families. It's the biggest that we've ever done, and it's quite amazing. It's done, we're partnering with a permaculture organization called Trihita Karana in Indonesia, and they're based out of Bali. And you know, the leader of this organization is just so brilliant, because in the construction, he's just using like giant bamboo and like local rocks and like figuring out the perfect place in like that community to build really sort of a pond, you know, because it's no longer those small tanks. Like that's not going to do enough, because this is 500 meters above sea level and there is no groundwater. The only water that we would have access to right now is harnessing a spring, which is 3 kilometers away, or collecting rainwater. So we're constantly evolving as an organization too, in this, due to the impacts of climate change on the very communities we've been working in. So continuing our conversation, I'll just remind, please, everybody who's listening, there's quite a few participants, please add questions in the chat, and we'll get to them as we go through this conversation. But to continue, Maya, you have been involved in a hands-on way with Surge. You've attended our events. You worked collaboratively with our team on publishing this beautiful case study that celebrates our work. And so, yes, we talked about the, you know, your connection to water, just both personally and like what you're teaching your young daughter. But, you know, from just an employee engagement standpoint, how important have those sort of exercises with Surge been to you? And also, like, there could be several other participants on here that are representing companies that could maybe bring Surge's program back to them. So could you speak about like employee engagement through your experience, and just also how other companies could get involved?
Yeah, Shilpa, you mentioned I attended your galas, your Break the Barrier Menstrual Health Program event. I was involved in the environmental education program. Each one of these events left a special impact. I must say the Breaking the Barriers event, I personally felt empowered listening to the stories and collectively discussing the challenges that women all over the world struggle with. When we all stood together in a circle and we held hands and we shouted, "We are women, we are strong," that was just really moving. It's exactly what I needed to hear, to feel that collective power. And I couldn't imagine what those women in those communities in Uganda felt when they did the same exercise. I do remember reading one of the girls' testimonials saying that I can be president one day, and that it doesn't get more powerful than that. The education program was really uplifting. It was really uplifting watching it come to life. The joy on these kids' faces, learning with play and song, and how it all resonated was just so powerful. And I will definitely use those educational tools about water and soil and hygiene with my 2 little girls. The gala, you know, being there, meeting all the incredible individuals behind the scenes that usually help with Surge, and listening to you speak, you know, you can't not be motivated. And so what makes our partnership and foundation so special is being able to be actively involved, and therefore feel the gravity of the impact and how our combined efforts are really making a difference. And maybe one day I'll go to Uganda, but I was pregnant last time, so I couldn't go, but maybe one of those days.
Well, that's beautiful. I mean, I can feel that energy in our partnership when we hear you speak. And I don't know, there's that whole thing, right? Like we can speak as much as we want about our work, but when other people like validate it, it's just a beautiful testimony. So thank you for that. Jordan, how about you? Like how has you are obviously actively involved, again, being our ambassador for many years. You still also need to make it to one of the field countries, but in the meanwhile, how is this?
Yeah, I definitely will. So it's funny. As you know, I've missed the last couple galas. I just seem to always have something going on when these things occur. But I've had a lot of coworkers attend these events, and what's always so great about that is hearing, their interpretation of what's going on, and like you said, how inspiring it is, it's really encouraging. In so many ways, not only just for Surge, I don't want to diminish how important that is, but Sam Barnett has built really a wonderful platform for engaging, employees and getting them involved with charities that really they feel passionate about. And so the Surge galas and have been a really great feedback mechanism for other people to see how we can get involved. It's real, you get to go to this thing. It's fun, of course, whatever. But also you get to hear the numbers and the impacts, and it's real. And so I think that there's real power to that. And it's really often one of the first examples that comes up whenever we have a new hire is like our relationship and here are these wonderful things we do, but also, hey, if you want to go to this fun gala, you can do that as well and see that this is something that is real here at this company. And so I do think it is a big piece of our marketing internally to our employees and a good way to engage them, and have the ability to have a broader sort of set of impacts on the world than just not having access on their own. So I love all these things. Like I said, it's been a couple of years since I've attended, but I can't wait to go visit Uganda. Hopefully with the pandemic, we'll see how it goes, but I'd love to be more involved. And I know my fellow coworkers are always excited to attend these events, and it really does bring awareness to the cause, and it's a really wonderful treat.
Thank you for that, Jordan. I think just for everybody listening, I do want to share that between Maya and Jordan's experiences with Surge, obviously we have these fun galas, but actually just happened. This would be the perfect timing of we're like, here's the link, join us next week, but it happened 2 weeks ago. So next year, you missed out on this one, but next year, we will be sure to share those details. But we've done so much more, right? Like Jordan, your people on your team have, been part of like our World Water Day events. Maya, you've helped us develop curriculum. You've helped for the environmental education program, being part of our menstrual health, like our local programming here. Both of you have been instrumental in helping us create case studies, which now, and we actually have a different approach for the case studies, right? Like one is about this, private company based in Chicago that has grown with us together. And then another is like this international company where we like collaboratively and working with an employee foundation and what that's done. And both of those are tools that allow us to keep growing. But also for people listening, like there are so many ways to be involved with organizations, with movements, especially if you're here attending Chicago Water Week. It's just to keep that in mind of like, we're part of this world where there's this global issue. And if water is something that you're passionate about, you can be involved through organizations like ours, but also like from the climate change angle, from employee groups, volunteering with, local initiatives. And of course, when travel's back again, coming with us to the field. But just there's in many ways, like there's no excuse. Like I'd really think that it becomes our responsibility and our shared response. We do something in whatever capacity we're able to. We do actually have a question come in. So could you talk about the greatest challenges your company has for meeting philanthropic goals and developing meaningful nonprofit partnerships? So just overall, like, what is CSR? What does philanthropy look like at your companies, and what are those challenges? Who would like to go?
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I think so. We're still very much constructing our approach, but we've found that partnerships like what we have with Surge have been really helpful because there are things that we really like. We like to be extremely efficient and have these sort of outsized impacts. The return on investment is important, but also having unique approaches and an openness to doing things differently. And that's really helped us sort of filter through so many other charities and organizations that we've chosen to support over the years. So it's been great. But I guess the challenge has been, how do we replicate what we've done with Surge everywhere? I think we're still trying to figure that out. So, and we're going to continue to learn how to do that.
So Maya?
I'll add to that. Again, one of the things that make the foundation special is that the employees are the heart of it all, because it's employee-led foundation. But that comes with a little bit of a challenge for the foundation, because that makes it inconsistent funding from the employees, and it makes it very difficult to commit to long-term funding relationships with partner organizations, since we really never know how much funding we'll be having in the year to follow. So that inconsistency of funding would impact every foundation program. Now, 2020 was a special case, with COVID-19 having such a profound impact on the world, not just affecting public health, but also causing lockdowns and closing borders and impacting economies. And that also made our involvement on the ground much more difficult. The foundation had to step up and had to respond to the crisis, and they provided COVID-19 recovery fund, unrestricted funding, and supporting some research to understand ways to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. But this, unfortunately, was not accessible to all the partner organizations. So even though it's there, it's not available for everyone. So that is a challenge. In terms of what success would look like, it will basically be a multi-year financial commitment from stakeholders, which would really allow us to grow the foundation programs and become much more stronger financial partners for our organization.
This is, I think, if there's any other nonprofit members or leaders on this in the participant panel, I think they were all like clapping and celebrating with what you just said, Maya, because this again shows like the transparency and the honesty and the partnerships we have with both of you and your companies, because of course we want to find ways for employees to be engaged. Of course, we want business integration where customers and suppliers and employees and business and products and services can be integrated. But in the end, right, nonprofits need money in order to do the work that we're doing. And when we are, especially, both of your companies have supported us over the long term. So, and then that's an interesting point, because neither have made a multi-year commitment, but it has been a multi-year commitment just because of the investment. But when we are at that point where multi-year commitments can be made, and whatever aspect you are, whether you're from a nonprofit, if you're a company and you happen to be a decision maker right now, those things are really important, because it allows organizations like ours to focus on the things that are most important and not be like fluctuating with the ebbs and flows in funding. So I think that that's really, it's just a really amazing and powerful statement that honestly still has to be learned in our space, because so many orgs like ours are applying for grants year after year where we could just lose the money the next year. And then what happens? What happens to the people hired, especially when it's related to staffing, right? It's like, where do you find that alternate money? And that struggle continues to be quite challenging. So that transparency between companies and nonprofits is so important in the overall success and our joint success in these programs, and why we're able to announce these sort of beautiful partnerships. There is, again, just another ask for questions if there are any, because we'll start wrapping up here in a few minutes. So please feel free to ask any questions from any of the three of us, but I do have something, just along those lines of sort of like both companies, and just, and we can bring this up to a holistic level so like everybody can relate to it. Something that's been really successful in these partnerships we've had, and I mentioned this earlier, was the trust, right? Jordan, you mentioned that something that resonates with SBB is the fact that this last year we needed toilets and you were always doing water, and then you were like, I can do toilets. And that's just an amazing way you described it. Like, okay, if someone doesn't understand toilets, they understand education. And that was the pitch there. And then this year, your company is very interested in supporting monitoring and evaluation, which is incredible, because that's like the way forward. We can't build all these wells and these toilets and not have a proper monitoring and evaluation system. And then Maya, from your side, we talked about the fact that I don't think we mentioned on this particular panel, but we've had many conversations about what do you really need, right? Like, do we need, for a period there, we were only doing the toilets for girls, and then we worked together and we're like, and actually, Jordan, we talked to you now about toilets for boys too. So you all haven't spoken, but these things of like these conversations integrate, stuff that we say to ERM impacts SBB and vice versa. So I guess, as maybe this sort of being like the closing conversation, unless we get any more questions, is what is a company's responsibility in this space for being open-minded and trusting an organization? And I understand you can't just start working with an org and maybe trusting them right away, but how do you get to this point where we're at, honestly, of like us coming to you and saying, this is the most important thing, and then you'll legitimately look at that? Indonesia, right now, we're going to be working there. Like, that would be an example. I would feel comfortable, Serge would be comfortable going to both your companies and just saying, hey, it's a pilot. We don't know if it's going to work. Would you help us going through that? And I feel confident that you would genuinely consider it. So what's that role? And and do you even understand that importance that you'll have played in this space? Both a thank you and a question there of like, this is how we can evolve as an org. Sorry, I hope you got a question out of that.
Yeah, I definitely did. So as a hedge fund, we're obviously evaluated against our past performance. And so looking back over the course of our partnership, the metrics are just unbelievable. Maybe initially it was a bit of a flyer, but we had some conversations, and some of my coworkers and I were all interested. But over the years, the data that's come out of this, I mean, the numbers really have borne out, your ability to execute on your plans. So the trust has come, hand in hand with that. And I think going forward, you've really established, such a follow through with that I think that it actually dovetails quite nicely with how we view the investment world as well. So it's easy for us to grow in that sort of linear trajectory as far as trust is concerned. So yeah, we would always hope that you would come to us with any kind of idea, because we come to you because you know what you're doing. If we knew what we were doing, we wouldn't need you. And so we like to add value if we can, but mostly we want to hear where can we have the greatest impact. And you've really demonstrated over time that you know where that is. And even if you're doing a pilot project where you're saying, I'm not sure, but it could be, we feel that we have that trust in you, and that's well deserved.
So Jordan, just to follow up on that, but just in general, right, to like take this to almost in a way that's not Surge, and maybe it's just SBB Research Group, like, as nonprofits coming into the space, or even as companies coming in, like, what builds that? I mean, is it just the proof of time? Is that what I'm hearing that gives you?
No, it's certainly not just that. So we actually, for the last year now, we've had a monthly competition, grant competition for local charities. And that's sort of, I encourage anyone to look into this on sbbrg.org. But there's a set there's a rubric essentially that we use to evaluate. Now, if it's not something, obviously these are all new organizations, so we don't have that history. But that history that we have is the easiest and most obvious way that we can, evaluate opportunities, because that's real data. There's real data points that we can point to. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there are other, I guess the other things that we look at, obviously, you know, what is the pedigree? What are the goals? How do you evaluate it? What are the metrics? You know, how does this align with other things that we might be doing, and who's actually interested in this? You know, is it a compelling case? But I mean, there's more information that I don't have on hand, but we do have a bit more of a thoughtful approach that isn't simply how long have we been partners together, but it is certainly a very important aspect to our relationship.
Thank you. And Maya, from your perspective, and me.
Yeah, so the foundation sets annual targets that are aligned with our sustainable development goals. The targets really help us concentrate our resources and provide a framework. And one of our focus areas is access to clean water, sanitation, hygiene. And our target for next year, 2022, is to provide 10,000 people with improved access to water and sanitation, including menstrual hygiene, education. And we hope to achieve that a lot with our partnership with Surge. And you guys have proven that your projects are self-sustaining. You've shown that the communities end up owning the projects that you end up developing there. You have built a health center, and you've built training programs, and you've built skills so that this community is not 100% dependent on Surge. And that basically follows the whole concept of sustainability and moving things forward. And no one community is dependent on you, but you're basically training, teaching them, moving on to the next community and letting that community thrive on its own.
Thank you. Jordan or Maya, is there anything else that we didn't get to that you would like to say in closing before I wrap us up today? And thank everybody else for joining.
I think I'd just like to mention, you know, last year and still, I guess, you know, being in a pandemic, it's brought out a lot of really awful things in the world. And I know last year we were pretty thoughtful about having a response in Uganda to COVID, and that was sort of a bit out of the purview, you know, of Surge. But I just want to express my appreciation for, you know, how nimble you are and effective at really addressing just massive problems in the world, and we really appreciate that.
And Jordan, you guys were nimble in turning money around to allow us to do radio programs to advertise how to stay safe. I mean, that's what happened, right? We were able to do weekly radio programs that reached tens of thousands of people. That's not even in that 20,000 number we spoke. So yeah, very grateful from our end as well. Maya, do you have any closing words?
I just want to say thanks for this opportunity. I look forward to many more years of working together with Surge. And I know a lot of people that I talk to get really excited about working with Foundation. And I think we've established a really good newcomers that really want to be involved. So I thank that to you and the successful partnership that we've had so far between Surge and ERM.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I'm gonna thanks to everybody who has joined us here today. I just want to reiterate that you know, this conversation today with SBB Research Group and Jordan and Maya Zain and ERM was really to highlight a strong example, a really strong partnership example of how companies, foundations, and nonprofits can come together to do amazing work. Just with the three of our organizations on this panel, we've impacted over 50,000 people once you take like the radio programs and stuff. And that's only since 2015, right? When we started the relationship with SBB and then soon after with ERM. So really strong transformational things can happen when trust is built between nonprofits and companies. And, you know, just really proud to say that all of these connections started here in the city of Big Shoulders, in Chicago, on the banks of Lake Michigan. We understand the gift and the blessing that we are given with this abundance of water and all of this technology and innovation. And, you know, we welcome partnerships with anybody listening, or like those of you listening to the recording later. I mean, you can partner with us in the way Maya and Jordan have done through their companies. Obviously, you know, if you're an individual donating, There are volunteer opportunities to serve on boards. I think you definitely heard about how fun our galas are. And so that's a way. And, when travel becomes available again, come to the field. You can see this work firsthand. And, the simplest way to be in touch is by following us at Search for Water. So with that, thank you very much. This is my personal contact information that, if you want to reach out for, just even questions that you did not ask today, or even have for Maya and Jordan, we can forward it to them. So we're grateful for you spending this afternoon. Thank you again, Maya. Thank you, Jordan, for joining us for this panel at Carvin's Chicago Water Week. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Shilpa. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great day.